Hi everyone, it's Rosemary at Red Sky Gallery. I am excited to be showing you the next installment of our Familiar Ground show. I'm here with Adele McFarlane Wile, and we are going to show you some of the work. She's going to tell us a little bit about her process and some of the pieces. And yeah, before we get started, I'm just going to read to you her statement about her work and her approach to this joint show with Adam Tregekas. Adele writes, "In these paintings, I have limited myself to only using images that I've taken from my home yard. The small abstractions on paper are investigations into different colors and textures found just outside my door. In the figurative pieces, I use my children as subjects to explore narratives about the beginnings of life, growth, sibling relationships, and early connections with the natural world." You know, there's something very interesting about how everything is so connected to this moment. You know,
Yeah,
limiting
yeah.
the things that are only outside your door, and now you're not allowed to go, like.
I know. It's definitely so bizarre how in approaching the works in the show, it really came out of me trying to work within the limitations of, like, I have two young children, and it's, I want to have an art practice, and so I'm always kind of trying to figure out how to negotiate and maybe use the limitations that I have to explore the themes that I'm interested in. And so now we're in a situation where, yeah, the just outside your door and like within, the space of your house, that just suddenly takes on this whole new meaning. So yeah, it's really, really bizarre situation that we're in, but it does, yeah, just in terms of this work, it's really makes me feel a lot of things. So
I'm just going to point out, so I do have a piece here. We're going to show you a couple of Adele's abstractions, but they are under glass, so it's not ideal. It's hard not to get the glare. So I will give you a little bit of a close-up. Here we go right now. There we go, a little bit. Here we go.
yeah.
Little guy.
So this little one is Star Moss, and I think it's Star Moss number 2. The whole process of these abstract pieces was I was spending a lot of time in the yard with my little girl, and just sort of contemplating how this sort of like slow movement through the backyard, and really spending all of this time with all of the textures and colors and things that, like, you might just pass you by, if you're moving fast. But as a toddler gains more movement, you kind of have to move at their pace, so it's pretty slow. And I was just really kind of amazed at just in terms of thinking about abstraction and really spending time with all of the color and texture. And this particular piece, I was thinking about organic shapes, so just sort of like stripping back the visual information and thinking about just that organic form. There was like kind of this little mound of star moss that I was trying to not necessarily capture exact likeness of, but kind of taking what I liked about that organic form and creating an abstract piece out of it. Yeah, if you want to bring another one up. Yeah, so this one is winter dogwood. And so there's this dogwood bush in my yard, and it's actually featured in another painting in this series as well. It's just so beautiful, many, during different times of the year. So this is a kind of a winter view abstraction inspired by the repetition, the kind of texture that I saw in the dogwood. So
Beautiful. And it's eventually people will be able to physically be present to see some of this work. It doesn't necessarily translate super well on video, but it's they're beautiful, very, like, I don't know, pleasant expressions. They're quite lovely to be
thank you.
presence of. So why don't I pull up the dogwood. And so we are moving from the abstractions into the figurative.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah, so this is Dogwood, and this piece is kind of all about, I guess, relationships, specifically sibling relationships. And I was just so obsessed with watching Odessa, my daughter, and Augustus, my little son, kind of move around each other, like just after he was born, and just sort of the space that they would inhabit, or like these poses that they would fall into. And it really started to make me think about how we move around each other, and these kind of like, almost thinking about it like a dance, and how there's sort of this unconscious thing that happens, when we move around each other. And this particular image, there was just something about the light, and that the pose of the two of them with their backs towards each other. It just brought to mind so much about my relationship with my own siblings. And I think how when we're young, we, the relationships that we have with the other little people in our lives kind of teach us how to, be people. Like, so whether it's a cousin or a sibling, or, anyone that you're close to when you're younger, this kind of, how we figure out our boundaries and how to kind of move around each other. And so that's really what this piece is about. And the dogwood just fit for some reason, like kind of overlaying the image of the plants and the dogwood over their bodies. And there's something just sort of like, it was in bloom, I think, at the time. And so I sort of related the two images together. And it's something that just sort of relates a little bit to fairy tale. And then I was kind of going down a rabbit hole with like fairy tales and siblings and all of that stuff. So it kind of just, it came together in that way.
I'll switch it for sun and moon, because it also expresses that. Here, I'll go do a close-up. This is it's a really sweet piece. It's I always find it interesting, how you work. I'll let you talk.
Sure. Yeah. So this piece was fun for me, and it really kind of, this is where I started to get into like, okay, there are all these things, all of these sort of themes and things that I'm interested in working on, but I've never really been sure how to tackle it through paint. And then all of a sudden I gave myself these limitations of like, okay, well, you have to figure out how to do that only using images that you're kind of, finding in your yard or in your home, the stuff that you're seeing every day. Like, how can you communicate these concepts and themes using what you have, basically? So I've been so interested in how, when, like, from the second someone is born, they are themselves. Like this, it's the weirdest thing. And I'm so fascinated by this, like their personality is exactly the same, and you can see it when they're born. And so, Odie, who she is now, is exactly who she was when she was born. And I find that so, so fascinating. And then to have another kid and to sort of see the same thing, it's like characteristics that are just inherent from the second that they are out in the world, that is like present through like them growing up into toddlers. And I always like have to kind of get in a little bit of like esoteric stuff into my work. And so with this piece, I was thinking a lot about like, so it's called Sun and Moon. And it's really about this, like the fact that they're like night and day. And but then there's also, thinking about all of the things that sort of make up our personality. So there's like genetics and all kinds of things. And I just love that like astrology is kind of becoming really popular again, which I'm like, yes, because I find it so fascinating. And maybe it's because I grew up. What was that?
We're doing it.
Yeah, we're doing it. Yeah. And so I've been kind of getting into this like contemporary astrology stuff just for fun. I mean, I just think it's hilarious and fun, but I was reading this description that was like, well, astrology is like this snapshot of the natural world and the alignment of the planets the minute you're born. And I'm like, oh, that's so fascinating and so cool. And I love how you can kind of look at astrology as this kind of contemplation of the world around you and how that relates to you as a person and your personality. And, whether it's like real or anything, I mean, that kind of doesn't matter to me. I just think it's really poetic and lovely to think about. And there's just a lot there in terms of art. So it was fun to be able to kind of tackle those themes that I'm interested in this piece. So. Yeah.
Oh, I forget my job.
Yeah. So this piece is called Rose Hip. And this is another one that's sort of about, this is like kind of the beginnings of life. And this one for me is a little bit like tongue in cheek too. Like it's a little bit funny to me, but it also has a deeper meaning. But so babies, when they're first born, are like the weirdest, most alien, strange things, but they're also at the time, and I think because it's like all the hormones and everything, they're the most beautiful. I mean, to be around a newborn is like this otherworldly thing, but they're kind of like also really grotesque at the same time. Like, to use a better term, I don't know. They're just, or like, it's really otherworldly. They're such a strange little thing. It's kind of before they get, and this is like, the first couple days when they're out in the world. They just have this, they're just very strange little creatures. Then also, I was thinking about how, the newborn, and then with the rose hips, because the rose hips are sort of like the end of the rose. So it's this kind of also thinking about how closely, this kind of life and death thing is at the early stage. And there's really this, I don't know, it's like sense you're close to that like veil or something like that in those early days with a newborn. So that's sort of what I was trying to explore with this piece.
It's really captivating. It's a really piece. Like when you're around it, I'm just, I don't know. It's a real. It is everything you just said. You're just like,
Oh, thank you.
but that's so beautiful. You just sort of like,
Yeah.
lovely piece. Okay, let me try. Really, this piece fascinates me. It's called Summer Garden. It is. I don't know. It's very interesting, and it's a shame, really, because I don't think it translates. The light in this piece is really beautiful. It's really something to see.
Thanks. So this one is really kind of about sort of traveling through one's environment when you're a child, or like even when you're spending time with a child. So I'm always kind of, I love the, finding tension in a work. So, I might choose an image specifically for a pose or the light or something, but there always has to be this bit of tension. So a little bit of, I don't want to say like, but maybe like if there's something a little bit like ominous about what's happening here too. Like it's a lovely image, but at the same time there's the shadow and there's this overpowering kind of big garden plant that is, not necessarily big, but because of, she's so little, and then, just her relationship to that large, like it was a squash plant. And so I just, yeah, I love that tad bit of foreboding, which for me is always like, oh yeah, that's good. Like I'd like to have, I'm always kind of searching for that tension between like a comfortable, familiar image and then but it kind of makes you feel uneasy at the same time. So that's sort of like that space that I try and inhabit with a lot of these. And so,
And
yeah.
you nail it. Like you always nail that. I feel the tension. But this is maybe I guess in this piece, and again, I don't know if you can see, but can you use oil on board, and you also very effectively use the absence of paint incorporated into your work. And I have other pieces here, and I won't go around pulling them off the walls, but that reflect that. And I find that it also lends something. I don't know, is there are we veering off or
yeah, so when I'm working, I'm constantly sort of interested in like how much surface to cover, or like how much information to put in, or how can I use the background in the piece. And part of it is like, because I always like to have that little hint of like, this is a painting, like this is this is paint and it's on a surface. And so having that surface kind of show through for me is always important. So it's not present in like all of them, and sometimes like I might paint the entire piece and then I will sand out parts of it, or I'll like intentionally, put paint on and then take paint away. And so that I'll talk about in some of the other pieces too, but it's just kind of part of the process. And it's something like aesthetically, I'm sort of interested in leaving these little parts unfinished. There's Alice Neal, who's like a painter who I look at often. She had just a way of doing that as well, like just leaving little parts unfinished. And like I don't know what it is about that, and I love it. And whenever I see it in any painting, it's like if there's just even just a little hint of something left undone, to me it just gives a sense of like the artist's hand in it, or that it's like the actual process of making is still kind of within the work. And so yeah.
As an observer, and I mean, it does lend to a sense of ownership. I don't like I there's something very much like this is mine and I'm doing whatever.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that too, because it's like it's that idea of like just like leaving a kind of a crack to like invite somebody in. Yeah, absolutely.
This piece is called Familiar, Appropriate.
Yeah.
And both of these, this cat has been featured before, I believe.
Yeah, she has. Yeah. Nina is very photogenic. Like cat. Yeah, so in this piece, this is a piece actually where I had painted and then actually sanded out. So her shirt and actually part of the background, like where her head is, like on the upper part of the piece, is also been sanded down, so you can see the board.
Yeah.
So kind of like things were put on and then stuff was pulled away in when I created it. But this piece is kind of about our first encounters or our relationships with animals, and I'm so interested in like the kind of like human and animal relationships. And so in this piece, I mean, it's called Familiar, so I'm definitely like playing around with the idea of like having a familiar. There was a lot of interesting stuff with color going on here. So there's like a triadic color harmony with the violet and the orange, that there was like the orange in the cat's fur. And then there was also this kind of orange reflection that I amped up in her hair, and then the green as well of the background. So there was kind of a lot of this like really lovely color harmony happening. And then there was the relationship between her and the cat, which is like this gesture, this sort of like this sweet and very comfortable, her arms sort of wrapped around her, she's familiar, but then she was pinching her fur at the same time, and the cat was totally tolerant of it. Yeah. But so it's this kind of balance of like, oh, it's really sweet, sort of sentimental image, but then there's that tension of a little bit of aggression or something there that just kind of like, I was like, oh, I want to paint that.
Yeah, it's so interesting because kids never know. Kids spend so much time learning in their early years how much damage they can do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
How hard is their, is their punch or pitch, or like it's.
Yeah. To me, it kind of gets into that like relationship that we have with the natural world too. It's like we love our natural environment, but we also like just inherently, there's like aggression there, right?
I think the word I was hitting on, this is my segue word, I guess, was powerful. And so this next piece really, it tickles me. It's called Whitetail.
Mm-hmm.
And there's it's a magnificent.
Oh, thank you. This is one of the last pieces that I painted, but I was getting at a stage with all of these where I was like, oh, I can't, and not that I'm like want to get particularly political in the pieces, but there are all these things that like, I want to make paintings about, and I have never really been sure how to tackle fully. But one of the things is this idea of our relationship with our environment, our relationship with animals, our relationship to food and sustainability. And in this piece, I was really sort of playing around with that, like about our relationship with animals as what sustains us. So my husband is a hunter, and so a lot of the meat that we eat is meat that's been hunted, and our sort of our relationship to those animals, I find it's like very interesting. It's very complicated, just getting at the seeds of our relationships and how important animals are to that, you know, our existence. And I had Odie hold the deer skull, and then also she's wearing this sweater, which is like a wool sweater, so it's knit from animal products. And so it was just really kind of about thinking about all of that stuff, about the stuff that sustains us, that keeps us warm. You know, these relationships are really complicated, but also really beautiful, and so much meaning when it comes to when you think about like food and sustaining and the things that we wear and all of that. So yeah.
It's, yeah, there's something interesting about the innocence of these little hands. And then also that it's not, it appears that it's not frightening. The idea of a skull can be really frightening, but there's something very comfortable, I guess.
Yeah.
The image, but it's also really striking, and the sweater is really striking. Like the composition of it is just really impactful. It's, yeah, I really enjoy this piece. Thanks so much, Adele. This is a
Thank
really
you.
body of work, and again, like I am so looking forward to inviting people to come in a limited social distancing manner to see this work up close and personal, because it is a different experience. And I'm grateful for the internet, but I am grateful for you know, my eyes and my own ability to be in the same space and place as the work. So thanks so very much.
Thank you very much.
We will talk to you soon. And yeah, tune in, everybody, 7 p.m. on, like, whenever you're seeing this, it's probably happening right now. 7 p.m. on Friday, I'm going to have a vernissage, and I am coming to the vernissage, and probably nobody else is coming to the vernissage. So, you know, just me and some cheese and a bunch of art, and you should check it out. I will just have a little moment to celebrate and acknowledge both Adam and Adele's amazing accomplishments. So talk to you soon, and we'll talk to you soon, Adele, and yeah, all the best.